I still remember the day I first moved into my apartment in downtown Chicago. It was a quaint little place, nothing too fancy, but it had character with its exposed brick walls and large windows that let in just the right amount of natural light. I'd been living there for about 6 months when summer rolled around, bringing with it the kind of heat that makes you question why humans settled in the Midwest in the first place. The kind of heat that has you standing in front of your open refrigerator at 3 in the morning, contemplating whether you could fit inside if you really tried. It was during this heat wave that I properly met my neighbor, James. We'd exchanged polite nods in the hallway before, maybe a good morning here and there, but nothing substantial. He lived across the hall in apartment 4B, a guy who seemed perpetually busy, always rushing in or out with gym bags, briefcases, or grocery bags. From our brief interactions, I had him pegged as your typical straight guy. Athletic build, usually in business casual attire or workout clothes, and had a rotating cast of women visiting his apartment on weekends. Not that I was keeping track, mind you, but the walls in our building were thin enough that it was hard not to notice certain things. James was, objectively speaking, attractive. He had this rugged look about him, sandy brown hair that always seemed perfectly disheveled, a strong jawline with just the right amount of stubble, and green eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. The kind of guy who probably played football in high school and still met up with his buddies to watch games and drink beer. The kind of guy who, in my experience, usually gave guys like me, openly gay and not particularly athletic, a wide berth. So when my doorbell rang on that sweltering Saturday afternoon in July, the last person I expected to see was James, standing there in basketball shorts and a tank top that clung to his body in a way that suggested he'd been sweating profusely. His hair was damp, his face flushed, and he had this look of desperate discomfort that immediately made me wonder what was wrong. "Hey, he started, then paused, seemingly realizing he didn't know my name despite living across from me for months. "Alex," I supplied, trying not to stare at the way his tank top was revealing more of his chest than I'd seen before. "Alex, right. I'm James," he said, extending his hand. His palm was slightly sweaty, but his grip was firm. "Look, I hate to be that neighbor, but my AC unit just died completely, and the building manager says the earliest they can get someone to look at it is Monday." I winced in sympathy. It was currently Saturday, and the forecast showed temperatures in the high 90s all weekend. "That's rough," I said, genuinely feeling bad for him. My own unit was working overtime, the gentle hum of it a constant background noise in my apartment. James ran a hand through his damp hair, looking genuinely distressed. "Yeah, it's like a sauna in there. I've got fans going, but it's not doing much." I was wondering. He hesitated, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "I was wondering if I could hang out here for a bit, just until the sun goes down and it cools off a little. I promise I won't be a bother. I can just sit quietly in a corner or something." The request caught me off guard. We weren't friends, barely acquaintances really, and here he was asking to spend time in my personal space. But there was something so genuinely uncomfortable about his current state that I couldn't bring myself to turn him away. Besides, what kind of neighbor would I be if I left him to suffer in his own personal heat chamber? "Sure, come on in," I said, stepping aside to let him enter. "It's not much, but the AC works, and that's what matters today, right?" The relief on his face was immediate and palpable. "You're a lifesaver, man. Seriously, I owe you one." As James stepped into my apartment, I became acutely aware of how I decorated the place. It wasn't overtly gay in the stereotypical sense, but there were definitely touches that made my identity clear. A small pride flag on my bookshelf, a couple of framed photos of me with friends at pride events, art books featuring male figures. I watched James take it all in, wondering if he was regretting his decision to seek refuge here. But if he was, he didn't show it. Instead, he just let out a long, appreciative sigh as the cool air hit him. "This feels amazing," he said, closing his eyes briefly. "I think I forgot what it was like to not be sweating." I chuckled, relaxing a bit. "Make yourself comfortable. Can I get you some water or something? You look like you could use it." "Water would be great." "Thanks," he said, carefully lowering himself onto my couch as if afraid to get sweat on it. I grabbed 2 glasses of ice water from the kitchen and returned to find James looking at a book on my coffee table, a photography collection by a famous gay photographer. My stomach did a little flip, but I reminded myself that this was my home, and I had nothing to be embarrassed about. Here you go, I said, handing him the water. He took it gratefully, our fingers brushing briefly in the exchange. I sat down on the other end of the couch, maintaining what I thought was a respectful distance. So, what do you do, Alex? James asked after taking a long drink of water. I realize we've been neighbors for months, and I don't know anything about you. I'm a graphic designer, I replied. I work for an advertising agency downtown, but I do a lot of freelance stuff too. What about you? Financial analyst, he said with a slight grimace. Not as creative as your job, but it pays the bills. Though sometimes I wonder if it's worth the stress. And just like that, we fell into conversation. It was surprisingly easy talking to James. He was funny in a dry, self-deprecating way, and he asked thoughtful questions about my work and seemed genuinely interested in my answers. As the minutes turned into hours, I found myself relaxing more and more in his presence, the initial awkwardness fading away. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across my living room floor, but neither of us mentioned him leaving. We'd ordered pizza. He insisted on paying since I was saving his life with air conditioning, and we're now on our second beers, sitting closer on the couch than we had been initially. Man, I still can't believe how hot it is, James said, tugging at his tank top to create some airflow. Even with your AC, I'm still feeling it. It's because you're still overheated from before, I said. It takes a while for your core temperature to come down. He nodded, taking another sip of his beer. You know what's funny? When I was a kid, my mom used to let me lie on her chest when I was hot or not feeling well. Something about skin-to-skin contact being cooling. Weird the things you remember, right? I nearly choked on my beer. Was he suggesting what I thought he was suggesting? No, surely not. He was just making conversation, sharing a childhood memory. But then he looked at me with those green eyes, a hint of mischief in them. I don't suppose. He started, then laughed, shaking his head. Never mind, that's weird. What? I prompted, my curiosity piqued. James looked slightly embarrassed now. I was just joking about cooling down like that. You know, like my mom used to do. But that's obviously crossing a line. Forget I said anything. I should have let it go. I should have laughed it off and changed the subject. But something in the way he was looking at me, something in the air between us, made me bold. I mean, if you're really that overheated. I said, trying to keep my tone light, casual. There was a moment of silence, a beat where we both seemed to be assessing the situation, wondering if the other was serious. Then James laughed again, but it was different this time. Nervous, maybe even a little excited. You wouldn't mind? He asked, his voice slightly lower than before. We're both adults, I said with a shrug that I hoped looked more nonchalant than I felt. And it's just cooling down, right? Nothing weird about it. Except everything felt weird in that moment. Weird in an exciting, heart-racing kind of way. James set his beer down on the coffee table, and I did the same. Then, with a casualness that seemed forced, he shifted on the couch, positioning himself so that he could lean back against me. Like this? He asked, his back to my chest, his body between my legs. Actually, I said, my mouth suddenly dry. I think it works better chest to chest. You know, more skin contact for cooling. James turned to look at me over his shoulder, an expression I couldn't quite read on his face. Then he nodded and repositioned himself, turning around so that he was facing me. I leaned back against the arm of the couch, and he cautiously lowered himself onto me, his chest against mine, his head resting on my shoulder. The weight of him was substantial, but not uncomfortable. He was warm, very warm, and I could feel his heart beating against my chest, slightly faster than normal. We both lay there stiffly for a moment, neither of us quite sure what to do with our arms or how to process what was happening. This is a little awkward, James finally said with a nervous laugh. Just relax, I told him, trying to take my own advice. It's only weird if we make it weird. Slowly, we both began to relax. I let my arms rest lightly on his back, and he adjusted his position slightly to get more comfortable. The scent of his shampoo, something minty and masculine, filled my nostrils, and I tried not to think about how intimate this position was, how I could feel every breath he took. This is actually nice, James murmured after a few minutes. Cooling, like you said. Told you. I replied, hoping he couldn't feel how fast my heart was beating. We lay there in silence for a while, the only sounds in the apartment being our breathing and the hum of the air conditioner. It should have been uncomfortable, this prolonged physical contact with someone who was essentially a stranger, but somehow it wasn't. There was something almost soothing about it, something that felt oddly right. "Can I ask you something?" James said eventually, his voice vibrating against my chest. "Sure," I replied, tensing slightly, wondering what was coming. "Have you always known you were gay?" The question caught me off guard. It wasn't asked with judgment or disgust, just genuine curiosity. "Pretty much," I answered honestly. I mean, I didn't have the words for it when I was really young, but I always knew I was different. By the time I was a teenager, I was sure. "What about you? Have you always known you were straight?" I felt him stiffen slightly against me. "I thought so," he said after a pause that lasted just a beat too long. That "thought so" hung in the air between us, loaded with implications that neither of us seemed ready to address. Instead, we fell back into silence, but it was a different kind of silence now, charged, expectant. "I've never done anything like this before," James said eventually, his voice barely above a whisper. "Laid on another guy's chest to cool down?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "Been this close to another man," he clarified. "It's different than I expected." "Different good or different bad?" I ventured, hardly daring to breathe. "Different good," he admitted, and I could feel him relax further against me. "Really good, actually." My heart was pounding so hard now that I was sure he could feel it. "James," I said carefully, "what's happening here?" He lifted his head to look at me, his face just inches from mine. "I don't know," he said honestly. "All I know is that I've been noticing you for months. Every time I see you in the hallway, every time I hear your door open or close. I tell myself it's just because you're my neighbor, but, I prompted when he trailed off. "But I think it might be more than that," he finished, his eyes searching mine. "And I think that should scare me more than it does." I didn't know what to say to that. My mind was racing, trying to process what he was telling me. This straight guy, this neighbor I'd barely spoken to until today, was admitting to having some kind of feelings for me. It felt surreal, like something out of a movie or a dream. "You don't have to say anything," James said, misinterpreting my silence. He started to push himself up. "I should probably go. I've made things weird and—" "No," I said quickly, my hands instinctively tightening on his back. "You haven't made things weird. I'm just surprised." In a good way. He settled back down against me, relief evident in his expression. "So what do we do now?" he asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "This is new territory for me too. Maybe we just see where it goes? No pressure, no expectations. Just two people getting to know each other." James nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I'd like that," he said. Then, after a moment's hesitation, he added, "Can I stay here tonight? Just to sleep, I mean. My apartment is still a sauna, and—" "Of course," I said, perhaps too quickly. "You can take the bed, and I'll sleep on the couch." "We could share," he suggested, then immediately looked like he regretted it. "The bed, I mean. Just to sleep. If that's not weird." I couldn't help but laugh. "After spending the evening with you lying on my chest, I think we're past worrying about what's weird." He laughed too, the tension breaking. "Fair point." As night fell completely, we eventually moved to my bedroom. There was an awkwardness to it, both of us carefully maintaining space as we got ready for bed, but there was also an undercurrent of excitement, of possibility. When we finally lay down, side by side in my queen-sized bed, there was a foot of space between us, a respectful distance that acknowledged the newness and uncertainty of whatever was happening. But sometime in the middle of the night, I woke to find that distance had disappeared. James had moved closer in his sleep, his arm draped over my waist, his breath warm against my neck. And instead of moving away, I stayed exactly where I was, savoring the feeling of closeness, the unexpected intimacy of it all. The next morning, when we woke up tangled together, there was no awkwardness, no regret. Just a quiet acknowledgement that something had shifted between us, something that neither of us had been looking for, but that felt right nonetheless. James's AC wasn't fixed until Tuesday, which meant he spent 3 nights in my apartment. By the time he returned to his own place, we'd shared more than just my bed. We'd shared stories, fears, hopes. We'd crossed a line that I never thought would be crossed, and there was no going back. It's been 6 months since that heat wave, and James still comes over regularly, though not because of any AC issues. What started as an unexpected request from a straight neighbor has turned into something I never could have anticipated. A relationship that defies labels and expectations, That reminds me daily how love can find us in the most unexpected places. Sometimes I think about that sweltering Saturday, about how close I came to turning him away, to missing out on whatever this is that we've built together. And I'm grateful for broken air conditioners, for summer heat waves, and for the courage it took for both of us to admit that there was something more happening than just a neighbor helping another neighbor cool down. Life is funny that way, isn't it? The moments that change everything often don't announce themselves. They slip in quietly, disguised as ordinary days, as casual requests, as a straight neighbor asking to cool down on your chest during a heat wave. And before you know it, everything is different. Beautifully, wonderfully different. Total _char_count, 17,885.